Hi family, welcome back to ladensercrochets. If you're new to the channel, you're welcome. My name is Liz. Kindly subscribe and join the family. In this tutorial, we're making a cover-up dress. We'll be using the V-stitch. You can make this as a mini dress with the fringes, or you can do extra rows and get it to a maxi dress. Grab your materials and let's get into the tutorial. We're working with Winter King, a 4-ply yarn, which is 100% acrylic, and it's a medium weight yarn. You can substitute this with any medium weight yarn of your choice. Then we're going to use 2 hooks, a 2.5mm crochet hook and a 4mm crochet hook. Then we're going to need stitch markers, a darning needle, a pair of scissors, and a measuring tape. We start by working 2 bra caps, and this is my first bra cap, so I'm going to be illustrating to you how to make the second one. So you'll need to make 2 of these identical, and for the bra cap we're going to use the 2.5mm crochet hook. The reason why we're using a smaller hook is to make sure that the stitches are close together. We start with a slip knot, and depending on your size you're going to chain. For a size small to medium we're going to chain 11. For a size large to extra large we're going to chain 15. So I'm chaining 11 and I have my 11 chains. So we're going to begin row 1, and we're going to begin by blocking off the last chain, then chaining 2 more, yarn over, insert your hook into that chain that you're holding and pull up a loop to get 3 loops on the hook. Then you're going to yarn over and pull through 2 loops. Then yarn over, pull through the remaining 2 loops to complete a double crochet. Yarn over, insert your hook into the next chain and pull up a loop, then complete a double crochet. Then we're going to place 1 double crochet into every stitch till we get to the last chain. At the end of my chain I should have 12 double crochets. So just 1 double crochet into every stitch. Because I'd started with 11 chains, the first chain 2 that we've made is our first double crochet, then plus the 11, that will give me 12 double crochets by the end of this row. I'm coming to the end of the row and I'm just placing my last double crochet right there. Then we're going to go into that last chain and place another double crochet. So that will get me to 13 double crochets. Then we're going to chain 2 and go back into the same chain, the same last chain, with 2 more double crochets. So that is 1 and then a second double crochet. So in total we have 4 double crochets separated by a chain 2 in between. Then we're going to go onto the other side on the stitches that we've already placed the double crochets and place 1 double crochet into each of the stitches. So in total we have 13 stitches on one side, 13 stitches on the other side. So just go on, place 1 double crochet into every stitch on the other side of our chain. When we get to the end, we should have 13 double crochets. When we come to the end, we should be very careful not to miss the very first stitch, which is the chain 2 stitch. So the stitch where we have the chain 2 stitch, we're going to place our last double crochet right there. So you can count your stitches and make sure that you've gotten the right count. So if you had started with the 11 chains, you should have 13 on one side, 13 on the other side. Chain 2 and turn to begin the next row. Yarn over. We do not begin in the first stitch, we begin in the second stitch, and we're going to place a double crochet there, a double crochet into the 3rd stitch, into the 4th stitch, and we place 1 double crochet into every stitch till we get to the chain 2 gap. I'm in the last stitch and I'm placing the last double crochet right there. and that gets us to the chain 2 gap. So into the gap we place 2 double crochets, chain 2, 2 more double crochets into the same gap. Then we get to the other side and work a double crochet into the next stitch and 1 double crochet into all the stitches to the end. When we get to the end, you should remember to work onto the chain 2 so that you don't miss it. So just go on placing 1 double crochet into each of the stitches and be very careful not to miss the last stitch. So this right here is not my last stitch, that is my second last stitch. And so I'll place my last stitch on top of the chain 2 from the previous row. Then I'll chain 2 and turn to begin row 4. We begin row 4 into the next stitch. Row 4 or row 3? I think it's row 3. Yeah, this is row 3. So we're just going to place 1 double crochet into every stitch. When we get to the chain 2 gap, we're going to place 2 double crochets, a chain 2 and 2 more double crochets. And this is what we're going to repeat in all the rows. And as you do this, you're going to try on your cap and see whether it fits on your boob. So work rows as you place the cap onto your boob to confirm that it fits. And when it fits, you're going to stop. So the number of rows that you're going to work will depend on the size of your bust. So if your bust is small, you're going to work fewer rows. If your bust is big, then you're going to work more rows. Now for a size small to medium, I work between 5 to 6 rows. For a size large, I usually work like 8 rows. Then for an extra large, you can go up to 10 rows. So this totally depends on the size of your bust. So keep working these rows, repeat rows until you get to the size of the bra cap that you need. I have the 2 bra caps ready and I've already cut the yarn from one of them. I've worked a total of 7 rows to get me to my required size. As you can see, one of the caps, the yarn is cut off, but on the other one, I've not cut off the yarn because I'm going to use it to connect the 2 bra caps together. And we're going to start with a chain 2 and turn. Then we're going to begin from that very first stitch. We place 2 double crochets into that stitch. Then we skip 2 stitches, so 1, 2, into the 3rd stitch, we slip stitch, then chain 2, back into that stitch with 2 double crochets for a total of 3 double crochets together with the chain 2. Then we skip 2 stitches, 1, 2, into the 3rd one, slip stitch, chain 2, yarn over and do 2 double crochets into that very same stitch. Skip 2 stitches, 1 and 2, work into the third one, slip stitch, chain 2, 2 double crochets into the same stitch, 1 and 2, skip 2 stitches, 1 2 into the third one, slip stitch, chain 2, then 2 double crochets, and then we're going to count 2 stitches, 1 and 2, then into the third one do a slip stitch, and this is what we're going to repeat to the top till we get to the chain 2 stitch, that is. So I'm just working the 2 double crochets, then skipping the 2 stitches, doing a slip stitch, chaining 2, then 2 double crochets into the same stitch, then we skip 2 stitches, do a slip stitch, chain 2, 2 double crochets, then we skip 2 stitches and we're going to end at the last stitch right there, do a slip stitch, then we're going to do another slip stitch into the chain 2, and from here we're going to do a strap. So I'm going to chain 80, do a chain that is of the length of the strap that you want. I'm going to do 80 chains. I have my 80 chains, so I'll chain one more, go into the 80th stitch and do a slip stitch, just like that. Into the next chain, pull up a loop, do a slip stitch, into the third chain, do a slip stitch, and we're going to do 1 slip stitch into every stitch all the way down back to the cap. So just keep going with 1 slip stitch into each of the stitches. You can do slip stitches or you can do single crochets, it's all up to you. So if you're not very comfortable with the slip stitches, you can opt for single crochets. So just keep working the stitches all the way back to the cap and I'll meet you there. I'm coming to the end and I'm just placing the slip stitches, my last slip stitch into the first chain, then slip stitch into the chain 2 gap, slip stitch into the first stitch after the chain 2, then we're going to chain 2 at that point, that is after that first slip stitch, chain 2, back into that stitch with 2 double crochets, and then we're going to repeat that pattern to the bottom part on the other side. So whatever we did on the one side, we do on the other side. So slip stitch after skipping 2, chain 2, 2 double crochets, then skip 2 stitches, work into the third one, slip stitch, chain 2, repeat to the end, and I'll meet you there. I'm coming to the end and I'm just doing my last 2 double crochets there. Then the last slip stitch will be in the chain 2 stitch. So we are done with that edging on that bra cap. So then we're going to pick the next cap and connect it to the first one, to this one that I've already done. I'm going to do the connection from the side where I cut off the yarn. Begin right there with a slip stitch and then chain. So now we have the 2 caps connected, so we chain 2 and go back into that first stitch with 2 double crochets. Then we're going to skip and work into the third stitch with a slip stitch, chain 2, then 2 double crochets, and we're going to repeat exactly what we've done on the first cap to this other cap. So I'll do the edging on this side, then I'll do the strap at the chain 2 gap, and then I'll continue all the way to the bottom and I'll meet you at the end. So let's meet once you're done with the edging on the second cap. I've come to the end and I'm just going to do the last slip stitch, then I'll chain 1 and just pull up the loop, and there we have our bralette. If you do not wish to continue into a dress, you can work this as a bralette. What you're going to do is you're going to do a chain on one side and another chain on the other side and do the strap, and you'll be done with the bralette. But then we're going to extend this into the dress. From this point, we're going to change from the 2.5 millimeter crochet hook into the 4 millimeter crochet hook. We're going to work the skirt part of the dress with the 4 millimeter crochet hook. So insert it into that loop, and we're going to do an edging. I've already chained one. I'm working into each of the rows, and each of the rows will get 2 single crochets. So that's the first row. The second row will get 2 single crochets. The third row gets 2 single crochets. The next one will get 2 single crochets. And I'm going to place 2 single crochets into each of the double crochet rows all the way to the end of the bralette. That is, we're going to have the 2 single crochets on the rows on this cap and 2 single crochets on the rows on the other cap. So just keep going with the single crochets, 2 of them in each of the rows, and I'll meet you at the end so that I can show you what to do next. As you do the single crochets, count your stitches. Count your stitches so that you know the total number of stitches that you're going to have right here on the bottom row below the bralette. When you get to the middle part, I'm going to work over that end that is right there just to weave it in, and I'll just keep going with the 2 single crochets into every row to the end. I'm placing my last 2 single crochets at the end, and in total on that edging I have a total of 56 stitches. So then we're going to measure that length at the bottom part from one end to the next while slightly stretching. I'm at a length of 16 and I want to get to 30 inches, which is my waist length. So I'll need to increase stitches until I get to 30. I'm going to do a chain such that when I add the chains plus the stitches that I have, I get a multiple of 3, or a number that is divisible by 3. And when I stretch it out, it will get me to a length of 30 inches. So if your waist is bigger than 30, you're going to have to chain more. If it is less than 30, then you're going to have to chain less than I have. I went on to chain 40 plus 56, that will give me 96. And 96 is a number that is divisible by 9, and that is what I'm going to work with. So right here, I'm just measuring to see whether I've gotten to my waist measurement. And because I had 16, I need to chain until I get to 14. Like I've mentioned, I worked a total of 40 chains. And because I already had 56 stitches, that got me to 96. And when I stretch this out, it gets me to 14 plus the 16 that I had measured on the bottom edging, that gets me to 30. So then I'm going to connect that chain to the first single crochet that I did at the beginning. Do that connection right there. And now we've created a round. So we're going to be working in rounds. Now I'm just going to measure again just to confirm that I'm at 15 inches, which multiplied by 2 gets me to 30. And right here I have the 15. When I stretch it more, it will get to 16. So you don't want it to be too tight. Now let's begin our rounds, and we begin by chaining 2, chaining 3 actually, and then go back into that same stitch and do a double crochet. Then we're going to skip 2 stitches, yarn over, skip 1 and 2, work into the third, work a double crochet, chain 1, another double crochet into the same stitch. So we are creating a V stitch. Then we're going to yarn over, skip 2 stitches, work into the third, place a double crochet, chain 1, another double crochet to create a third V stitch. Yarn over, skip 2 stitches, work into the third, double crochet, chain 1, another double crochet. Then yarn over, skip 2 stitches into the third stitch, double crochet, chain 1, another double crochet. And we're going to repeat this all the way around. So just skip 2 stitches and work a V stitch. If you're enjoying this tutorial so far, kindly leave a like, a comment, and share this video so that so many people can come and watch it and recreate this pattern. Kindly subscribe if you're not subscribed yet. When we get to the chains, we're going to continue with the same pattern, just skipping 2 stitches and working into the third one. So right here I have my V stitch. I'll skip 2 chains, work a V stitch into the next chain, and then I'm going to skip another 2 chains and work into the third one with a V stitch, and then I'll keep going to the end. Let me keep going, and then I'm going to show you how to complete the round. I'm working my last V stitch right there because I only have 2 chains remaining, and then we're going to do a slip stitch onto the chain 2. We chained 3, but we are slip stitching onto the chain 2 like that. Then slip stitch on the gap between the double crochets, and we are done with round 1. We're going to start round 2 next. We're going to begin from the V stitch. We chain 3 back into that gap with a double crochet. We skip over to the chain 1 gap and place a V stitch into it. Then we skip over onto the next one and do a V stitch. That is a double crochet, chain 1 and another double crochet, V stitch onto the previous V stitch. So we are working onto the chain 1 gaps that we created from the previous round. So this is round 2, and I'll just keep going all the way around with the V stitch on top of the previous V stitches. I'll meet you at the end so that we can begin round 3. I'm coming to the end of round 2, and I'm just working in my last V stitch with another V stitch right there. Then we're going to slip stitch onto the chain 2 from the beginning, then slip stitch into that gap between the 2 double crochets, chain 3, back into that gap with a double crochet, then another double crochet, V stitch into the next V stitch, V stitch into the next one, and then continue to the end. So round 3 is going to be the same as round 2. We're just working the V stitches, and then when we get to the end, we're going to do a slip stitch onto the chain 2. I'm going to do a total of 5 rounds and then come back. Round 4 and 5 are going to be the same as round 2 and round 3. So this is very simple, a very simple pattern. So just keep going with the round 3, then work round 4 and 5. Then let's meet as we begin round 6. Right here I have my 5 rounds ready. As you can see, that's 3, 4 and 5. We're going to begin round 6, and before we begin round 6, we're going to chain 1 and cut off the yarn at that point. So cut it off, pull through and fasten. Now this is what we have. So we're going to turn to the back side, and we're going to hold our work such that the 2 caps are aligned like this. We want to determine the middle part of the back, and that's the middle. From the other side, I want it from the point where I've done the 5th row. So from the bottom part, that V-stitch right there will be the middle part of the back part. I hope that makes sense. So that is the exact middle of our dress at the back. Then we're going to hold it like this, then bring this point together with the slip stitch that we've just placed at the back, and we align our work. We just want to identify where we're going to do increases in order to achieve our hip measurement. So this is one of the parts where we're going to do the increase. Then the other part of the increase is a part that completely aligns with where we placed the slip stitch right there. So just like this, I'll remove this slip stitch in the middle and use it to mark that part of the hip on the other side. So those are the points where we're going to place our increases in order to get to our hip measurements, because right now we are at our waist measurement, which is 30 inches, and my hip measurement is 46. So I'll need to increase in order to get to 46. Start with a slip knot and connect the yarn at that middle point. Now pull up the loop and fasten, and we've reconnected the yarn right there. We're going to chain 3 back into that V-stitch with a double crochet to make the V-stitch. Then we're going to do a V-stitch into the next V-stitch, and we're going to repeat until we get to the stitch marker, and at the stitch marker we're going to do an increase. So I'll meet you right there and show you how to increase. When we get to the stitch marker, we're going to pull it out, and into that stitch where the stitch marker was, we're going to place a double crochet, chain 1, a second double crochet, chain 1, a third double crochet. Then we're going to chain 1 more and place a 4th double crochet into the same gap. So chain 1, go into the same gap and place a double crochet, and we have 3 chain 1s onto that same gap. So we're going to mark the middle one, the one in the middle right there. Mark it and then continue until you get to the next stitch marker. Just place 1 V-stitch into each of the V-stitches. I'm getting to the next stitch marker, and I'm just going to take it out. Then into that chain 2, that is the chain 1 gap right there, I'm going to place a double crochet, chain 1, a second double crochet, chain 1, a third double crochet, chain 1, and a 4th double crochet. Then we're going to get the stitch marker and mark the middle chain. Place the stitch marker back to that middle point, and then we're going to work a V-stitch onto the previous V-stitch. So I'm working the double crochet, chain 1, and another double crochet, and I'm just going to place 1 V-stitch into each of the previous V-stitch till I get to the end. When we get to the end, we do a slip stitch onto the chain 2, a slip stitch into the gap, chain 3, then the double crochet, and this is row 7. So we're going to do the V stitches, and in row 7 and row 8 we're not going to do an increase. We're just going to do 1 V stitch into each of the V stitches, even at the points where we have the stitch markers, we're just going to place just one V-stitch, but we're going to keep on marking those points. So get to the stitch marker, place just one V-stitch into it, but then mark that point so that we remember where we're going to increase next. When we get to the chain 1 before the stitch marker, we're going to place a V-stitch into it. Then we're going to remove the stitch marker and place a V-stitch at that point where the stitch marker was. And then we're going to get the stitch marker and mark that chain 1 gap on that V-stitch. And then the next gap will get a V-stitch. And this is the same exact thing that we're going to do when we get to the other stitch marker. Then we're going to continue to the end of round 7, that is. Then we're going to work round 8 without increasing. And then if we will not have gotten to our hip measurement, we'll increase again in round 9. So let me keep going. I'll meet you at the end of round 7. After working the last V-stitch, we are going to slip stitch onto the chain 2 and we are done with round 7. So then we're going to work round 8 and we slip stitch into that gap, then chain 3, back with a double crochet, then a double crochet V-stitch next. And now, like I mentioned earlier, we are also not increasing in round 8. So we're just going to place one V-stitch into each of the V-stitches and we continue marking the point where the stitch markers are. So do that and let's meet at the end of round 8 so that we can start round 9. This is after round 8 and we're going to measure to see how far along we are, whether we are approaching our hip measurement. So just turn your work like this, get the measuring tape and we're going to measure from one stitch marker to the next to see how far along we are with the hip measurements. I'm at 17 without stretching. When I give this a bit of a stretch, it's getting me to 19 inches and I want to work up to 23, sorry, so that when I multiply by 2 it gets me to 46. So now that I'm at, let's confirm that again. So I'm at almost 19 inches and I want to get to 23. So I'll just do the difference and then I'll be done with the hip measurement. So now we are in round 9 and in round 9 there's going to be an increase. We begin with a chain 3 and then a double crochet into that same gap. Then we do the V-stitch into the next V-stitch and repeat till we get to where the stitch marker is. At the stitch marker we take it out and now we're going to do the increase. I'm just going to show you how to do the increase one more time. Double crochet, chain 1, second double crochet, chain 1, third double crochet, chain 1 and a fourth double crochet, and then get the stitch marker and mark that middle chain 1, the one that is at the center right now, right there. Mark it, then continue with a V-stitch on top of the previous V-stitch till you get to the next stitch marker. Pull out that stitch marker when you get to it, and then place a double crochet, chain 1, a second double crochet, chain 1, a third double crochet, chain 1, a fourth double crochet into the same chain 1 gap. Then we're going to get the stitch marker and mark the chain 1 at the center or in the middle, and now continue with 1 V-stitch into the remaining V-stitches. So double crochet, chain 1, another double crochet, and then continue to the end. As you can see, we have an increase, then 2 rows in between, and another increase, and that is the pattern that we're going to repeat. We're going to increase, then we skip 2 rows without increasing, then we increase into the third row. So that means I've increased in row 6, then in row 9, the next increase should be in row 12, the next one should be in row 15. Now you don't have to increase up to row 15 or up to row 12 or even up to row 9. You'll stop once you get your hip measurement. So if you've increased just once and you've gotten to your hip measurement, you do not have to increase anymore. So I'm getting to the end of round 9. They are not rows, actually they are rounds. Slip stitch and then slip stitch again, chain 3, double crochet into that V-stitch to create a V-stitch, V-stitch into the next V-stitch, and this is round 10. And round 10 and 11 are going to be rounds with no increases. So just 1 V-stitch into each of the chain 1 gap, and I'll meet you at the end of round 11. So that we can confirm whether we've gotten to our hip measurement or we'll need to increase in round 12. This is after my 11 rounds, and I'm going to take the measurement again, the measurement of the hips, to see whether I'll need to increase again from 1 stitch marker to the next. When you're measuring the hips, you need to stretch out your work a little bit, and when I give this a bit of a stretch, it gets me to 23, which is what I was going for, and that means I do not need the stitch markers anymore because I'm not going to increase anymore. So I'm just going to take them out. If you've not gotten to your hip measurement, you're going to need to increase in this round. Now from this round until we get the full length of our dress, we're just going to work 1 V-stitch into each of the V-stitches. So chain 3, double crochet, V-stitch right there, V-stitch into the next V-stitch. In the next V-stitch, we do another V-stitch, and repeat to the end of round 12. So from round 12 until I get the total length of my dress, I'm not increasing. So keep going until you get the full length of the dress that you want. It could be mini, it could be mid, it could be a maxi dress. It's all up to you. So keep going. I'll meet you once I'm done with the rows because we're going to be working fringes. I'll meet you at the end to show you how to work those fringes at the bottom part of the dress. This is what I have for my full length, and I've done a total of 35 rows from the top to the bottom, and I have a full length of, let's confirm, this is from the point where the bralette ends. I have a total of 20.5 inches. I was going for 20 inches, so 20.5 is okay. Like I've mentioned, I've done a total of 35 rows. If you want your skirt, if you want your dress longer, you're just going to keep on repeating the rounds. So now at this point, because we are done, we're going to chain 1, slip stitch in the middle, then chain 1, and cut off the yarn, leaving a long end that is equals to the length of the fringe that you want. I want my fringe to be about 9 inches, so I'll just cut it off at that point, and then fasten. This is how I create my fringes. I'm just going to use this notebook, and I'm going to roll my yarn all over it. This gives me the length that I want. So I'm just going to roll the yarn all around the book until I get the number of fringes that are enough to go all the way around the bottom part of my dress. So I'll just keep going, and then I'll cut the yarn from the top part of the notebook. So just keep going, get whatever works for you. You could use a cardboard, or you can use your hand, whatever works for you. So just keep creating those fringes, and then we're going to cut them off and attach them to the dress. My fringes are ready, and we're just going to start looping them at the bottom part of the dress. So what you do is, I'm first going to get 2 strands. I attach them from where I've cut off the yarn. So just go into that chain 1 gap and pull up a loop. Then grab all the strands and pull them through that loop and fasten. Then I'm going to get 3 strands, and then I'm going to skip 1 chain 1 gap. So skip that and work into the next one. Pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull all the yarns through that loop. Then I'm going to get another 3 straps. Then I'm going to skip a chain 1 gap, then work into the next one. Then we grab the yarn, pull up a loop, and pull that yarn, all of it, through that loop, and then fasten. So this is what we're going to do all the way around the bottom part of the dress. I'm first going to work while skipping, and if I feel like I need to fill up the points where I've skipped, I'll do that, and then I'll be done. So just go on, attach the fringes however you feel is okay for you, and I'll meet you at the end. I went on to do fringes in all the chain 1 gaps. As you can see, the ones that I had skipped, I went on to fill them up, and this is what we have. The only thing that is remaining is to trim the fringes. I need to do this when the dress is on a mannequin, so I'm going to do that off camera. And at this point, we are done with our dress. So thank you so much for sticking around to the end of the tutorial. If you've enjoyed the tutorial, kindly leave a like, a comment, share, subscribe. And when you get to recreate this, kindly tag me on my social media pages. I'll be reposting your work. If you want to leave a special gift, click on the thanks button, and I'll appreciate you. See you in the next one.